This past summer, my family and I had the chance to do something new. We got to hike through a lava tube. It is this sort of 1.5 to 2 mile long cave, really, deep underground that was carved out by a flow of lava some number of years ago. And so you get to go and you get to go down and you get to hike along this long, straight passage. And it was fascinating to see how the lava had sort of carved the stone to look almost liquid there as we were hiking along. And it's underground, so it's always cold. It's always in the mid-50s. And as we were arriving there, and as we were hiking down in there, I had a hope for our experience. I hoped that while we were hiking this lava tube, that I could share with my boys something that I remember from when I was growing up. So when I was little, my folks took us to Mammoth Cave down in southern Kentucky. And back when you could still tour through Mammoth Cave, we got to walk around, and at some point on that tour, as we're looking at all the stalactites and the stalagmites and all of the different things down in there, the tour guide had us stop and then flipped off the light. Have you ever had that happen? Yeah? And it was a darkness like I've never experienced before or since. There's something about that kind of darkness, of real darkness. And if you've had that experience, you know that it's almost a physical sensation. You can almost feel it pressing around you, and you feel your eyes trying desperately to adapt to this dark. And yes, we all have to close our eyes to see if we can see, those lights on the inside, and open them to see if it's any better, and trust me, it's not. And as you're there in this dark and listening and feeling it pressing around you, you realize no matter what you do, no matter how long you were to stay there, you will never adapt to this dark. And I hoped that my boys would have that experience too, because I think we should all have that. And so down we went into this lava tube, and it's long and it's straight and it has a sandy floor, and it's great for hiking, and it was absolutely fascinating, and it turned out it was a very popular activity this particular day. And so there were just gaggles of people before and after. Folks who walked slower than we did, folks who walked faster than we did, a whole crew of college-aged men who went way fast down the cave. And so periodically I'd try to gather the boys and I'd have us all flip off our lights. And what I found is it never got dark, because there were so many people around us with their lanterns and their flashlights. And so it would reflect off the cave, and it would get dimmer and it would get lighter, but it never got dark. It never got that full dark that I had hoped for. And so my boys didn't get to experience that. And I find this fascinating, that for us, in our world today, darkness is something we have to seek out. Isn't that interesting? In our day and age, true darkness is something we have to actively seek out to experience what that really is. And if you think about it, in our language, we've even invented this new phrase, light pollution. You've heard this phrase, right? This is now a thing, light pollution. And the reason we have to seek out the dark is because we are so unused to it, so uncomfortable with it. Darkness and silence, I think, are the two things that leave us most uncomfortable. Think about how easy it is for us to banish the dark nowadays. I remember when we were living in Wisconsin, we went and visited an Amish farm to see the crafts that they had made. And you walk into the room, and it's kind of dim in there, and I caught myself automatically looking for the light switch. An Amish farm. There were no light switches, and as soon as I realized that, I sort of laughed at myself, but isn't that a sign of how we are in the world? It is so easy for us to drive darkness away that we hardly ever think about it. And I worry about that here in the church, too, because it's awfully easy and tempting for us as a church to look aside and look away from darkness, too. It's awfully tempting for us as a church to focus on the beautiful glittering lights that we've got over there. Oh, and look, we have them here too. It's awfully easy and tempting for us to focus on the good feelings, without looking at the dark places that those good feelings most need to be brought. It's awfully tempting for us to go for the lilies without the pain of Good Friday. And I worry about that for us, because if we just focus on the feel-good stuff, I worry that as a church, we're not speaking to where the word of Jesus most needs to be heard. And the truth is, as you and I both know, it's not that hard to find dark corners in our world. Just this week, I heard a story of a terrible tragedy in Ohio of a young teenaged man, 16-year-old, who committed suicide, which is tragedy enough, a dark enough corner that we have young people in our world and in our country who feel like that's their only way out. This is a terribly dark corner. But the worst of all in this case is that people on social media who never met this young man and never have met this family felt compelled to comment on it. And the things they have said, blaming the parents and other things like that, truly I tell you, evil and darkness has oozed out around this situation that's even worse than the tragedy that is dark enough. And the truth is, darkness is in our neighborhoods. It's in our friends' lives. It's in our schools. It's in our workplaces. We can't escape from darkness because we all live within it, and we carry inside us a little dark corner as well. And we as a church dare not look aside from it, because the darkness is where Jesus is born. Over the next several weeks, throughout January and February, our readings and our time of sharing are going to gather around asking a single question. So for these next coming weeks, we're going to be asking and wrestling together with the single question, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it mean for us to follow Jesus? And today, with our readings today, we get our first answer to what does it mean to follow Jesus. And the answer is, following Jesus begins with darkness, because following Jesus is in real life. And if you think about it, the darkness, the hard, gritty corners of the world are where Jesus shows up. He's born, an infant child of a teenage mother in an occupied territory. You can't get a grittier, darker corner. Jesus is arrived in this hardest corner of the world at that time in a dangerous situation. And that is so that the light that he brings and that he is for us shines in those dark corners. And that's why we know following Jesus has to begin with our own dark places and in the dark corners of the world around us. So what does it mean to follow Jesus? It begins with darkness because it begins with real life. So imagine with me for a second that you were down in that lava tube with me, but we're going to clear it out, nobody around. Or put yourself in Mammoth Cave or Carlsbad Cavern or any place where you can experience real dark. Imagine yourself standing there when all the lights go out. And imagine darkness as something you can almost feel. Imagine your eyes trying to adapt. Imagine, we all have to do this too, to see if you can see a single thing. So we all have done that, and no, you can't see a thing. Imagine how hard your body is working to adapt and get used to it. And imagine someone lights a match. Imagine someone lights their lantern, and there is a light that flares in the darkness. Can you picture this? Can you imagine this? It seems to me there are two basic ways that we can react to light in the darkness. The one is, as it surprises us, it can cause us to sort of shrink back, to step back from it in surprise, and maybe shrink back into the shadows. Today, reading is a story of two different kinds of kings, and one of the kings, Herod, shows us this reaction. When he discovers that the light has come into the darkness, he this dark corner because it's comfortable and it's predictable, and through cheating, lying, stealing, he has created a nice little dark corner. And faced with the light come into the world, Herod doesn't want to give up predictability. And he doesn't want to give up power. And he shrinks back into the shadows. In fact, he's getting even darker in a second, because when he realizes the Magi have tricked him, he starts killing children. So Herod, one of our kings, shows us that when light flares in the darkness, we can shrink back into the shadows. Or we have the Magi, the other kings, who show us something different. When light shines in the darkness, they look for something new. Somehow, these Magi have trained themselves to look for mystery. And we know this because they're the only ones that show up. We're the only that know to follow this star, this light that has shined, so that they can experience something new. Somehow they've trained themselves to look with new eyes, and so they come to Bethlehem. They come open to mystery. They come to pledge their lives to this infant king and offer their own treasures. And I cannot imagine that, having experienced that, kneeling before an infant king, offering yourself, pledging yourself to Jesus, that you could ever be the same. Yes, they have to go home into real life, but now they are followers of Jesus. Well, friends, this morning we are now those Magi. For light has shined in the darkness. We also have gathered before the infant King. We also have pledged our lives to him, to following him wherever he goes. We are the ones who, in the midst of a dark world and with our dark corners intact in our hearts, have seen this light shining. We are the ones who have experienced divine love. We are the ones who have experienced forgiveness that we didn't even know was possible. We are the ones who have been grasped by grace, even as we have held grace in our hands at the table. We are the ones who, through prayer and worship, gathering together, encouragement, giving, and service, have trained ourselves to be open to mystery. We are the ones who are learning to see the world with new eyes. We are the ones who have knelt before hope and had the Creator of the universe grasp us with his chubby hands. We are the ones who have knelt before the infant King. And so we follow Jesus. The light into the world that shines in the darkest places. We are the ones who follow Jesus out to the dark corners because that is where he is. We are the ones who follow Jesus into real life. This week, you are going to follow Jesus out into the real world because that is where he is. Jesus Christ come into the world to shine wherever it is darkest.